welcome to the strategy behind Franklin and Marshall College's simple video workflow with Al Manelli. Al, thank you for being here. This is going to be so much fun, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I'm home, so I couldn't give you an excuse, Kristen, but not that I would. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you here, and we're glad to have all of you here too. Thank you for joining us. This is part of our visual storytelling webinar series. To give you a little bit of background about us, Libris empowers effortless visual storytelling with a unified platform of technology, tools, and insights, and resources like this webinar series. Now we want to kick it off and talk about kind of a different topic than we had planned. We planned this webinar a couple weeks ago, and we still want to get to all of that too, but I think we're all kind of thinking about the same thing right now, and how do we address the challenges that we're all working with right now as we're going completely remote. A lot of things are getting canceled. Your campuses, in most cases, are shut down. So how do we adjust, and how do we respond in this moment? So I just want to start with a couple discussion questions, and Al, you and I can kind of talk about it as people find their questions box and let us know their thoughts. But I'd love to know, what type of content are you creating right now? What are you making? How are you getting creative in a time where I think it's really hard to be creative?
Well, until last week, we were still able to make it to campus. So I shot a few sort of update videos with the president for different audiences. But now we can't even go on campus. So any sort of filming of the president or teachers, staff, students, everything has to be done by themselves on their phone or on their computer. And we are sort of bringing those in. We are reaching out to students who are learning online now for the first time in F&M's history. We're reaching out to professors. We're reaching out to staff. Share your story. So we're kind of looking for inspirational stories or just interesting stories about how people are dealing with this, how it's impacting them, how they're, what their workstations look like. And a lot of this is from our social media coordinator, who's setting up a lot of that. In terms of video, immediately what we're working on right now is we have a huge event, and I know a lot of colleges have these events. Ours is called Closer Look, and it's basically admitted students to the college. They're still seniors in high school, but they come to campus, and we basically try to woo them. We want to have them, make F&M their choice. And we were supposed to do that April 3rd. And this is a big event. So right now we're producing a digital or a virtual sort of Closer Look event. And that has just been eating up our time. We're trying to produce videos about different things. We're using old footage, existing footage. We were able to shoot some new things. So in this sort of crazy time where it's like a sliding scale, like one day there's, totally new information coming out. We're trying to keep up. But, I think we're trying to, inspire as well. And I think that's important. I think having a theme in your work right now, especially, will kind of help narrow and focus everything. So.
Awesome. You have any chatter from that one?
Yeah, just a little bit, and definitely, if you are joining us, feel free to answer some of these questions into the questions chat box. So Matthew is saying they are shooting lots of video content similar to you, virtual tours, and using loads of file footage. It sounds like, Al, you guys are using a lot of that BRoll, and I'm sure, Kristen, you're really relying a lot on BRoll as well. I mean, I think this is probably the time. BRoll's time to shine.
It definitely is.
Indeed, yeah.
It looks like Bill from Little Rock, they're creating lists of restaurants doing takeout, a video urging people to stay strong and stick together. Some pleasant distractions like a quarantine bingo card. Oh, that's a fun idea.
Yeah, and I like that. And I think that right now it's more important to not try to raise money, not try to be messagey with the content. I think right now it's just to try to remind people that you exist and make them feel good right now, because I think everyone is sort of confused and unsure, of what's going on. So
Yeah, I think it's so much about what kind of value can you provide? How can you help people right now and give them what they're looking for?
yeah.
Kristen, there's a few more comments coming in now. It's really interesting. A lot of people kind of doing very similar things. Somebody shot 4 hours of a campus tour last week and pushing a 20-minute tour tomorrow.
Nice.
Somebody else is pushing out recruiter tips and tricks.
That's a good one.
Someone else is saying was saying they're using Google Hangouts to be remote studios for live broadcast programs on Facebook and YouTube. That's very interesting. And live board meetings via Zoom. So that's on a whole kind of different side of things.
Yeah, and looks like we've got somebody who said creating video using an iPhone and getting away from DSLRs, some shorts for field work. And I really like that idea too. It's about, and we'll go over that in even our evergreen tips. Like, it's not about just having the nice gear. It's also, just whatever the story is right now, you can capture it on whatever you have, whatever is easy access.
Yeah. And now is the time to experiment too, especially with, it can look homemade. It can look like it was shot on a laptop computer or camera. It now is the time for that. And I think people will even appreciate, Jimmy Fallon, like we were talking about, is doing his show in his backyard, basically wife is filming it on a phone, so
Yeah.
now is the time to experiment.
Absolutely. And I want to add this other prompt, how are you capturing the moment? I think there is, certainly a story to tell right now. And, you mentioned all your students are now learning from home for the first time. And there's so much change that's happening, and there's so much going on in every part of the world. So how are you capturing this moment, documenting either your empty campus or this, telelearning? How are you telling the story of right now?
I think what we're doing, and I'm assuming a lot of places are doing this as well, we're reaching out, like I said, to staff and faculty and students, and we're basically giving them a place to send their stories, whether it's recorded on a phone, which we can take that file, add B-roll if necessary, and boom, we have a video. So it's almost like we have thousands of, videographers at our beck and call, and as well as just written stories. Like, our magazine is doing the same thing, our writers, everyone. We are looking to, the people, because we can't go out and do what we normally do, which is something we'll get to, our sort of news investigative kind of style in finding content and finding stories. So now we really have to hope that people will bring them to us.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, the user generated content that comes up, from universities, because I think, as you're working to kind of tell the story of what's going on, on your virtual campus, you can collect videos from students based on a specific prompt and then kind of cut together a story that really fits your university personality. And that could be a really fun way to make it feel a little more normal. You all have anything coming in on the chat?
A lot of things coming in on the chat, mostly actually back to that first question,
Sure.
but a couple of new kind of methods, I guess, talking about crowdsourcing. So some people are having students film supportive messages that they're sharing or planning on sharing on social. And then someone actually sent a YouTube link about a couple of segments they did by crowdsourcing. And I know I've been seeing that just in my own personal email, like my elementary school, for example, sent, an email that was entirely about parents and kids doing some home learning together. And then someone else was talking about, I think in related to like that B-roll conversation, tying in augmented reality, which, that's pretty interesting and certainly different than what we've been hearing.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll come back to this in the Q&A section. I wanted to learn a little bit more about the Quarantini bingo card. So there's a lot there. So let's definitely, if we have time, come back to that.
Love it. Great. And then my last, prompt here, I think is, a really important one. How are you creating a sense of connection through content? this is such a lonely time in a way, and in such a way, people are feeling very like disconnected. And so how do we make people feel more connected? And, when your students aren't on campus, how do you make them feel like a part of something? So Al, what would you say to that one?
Well, I think obviously number one is just communicating with your audience and with not taking this time to go on hiatus or, staying, creating content, putting it out there. We put out messages from the president. Our president is very active in sort of updating parents, alumni, students, everyone as to what's going on. And I think people appreciate that. And again, when we start getting in more of these stories, we want to find those sort of uplifting stories. And, I think this is a good time for everyone, just this type of, or sort of organic, we're basically going to be making like vlog type videos in a way, people sharing their daily routines. And I think when the larger audience sees something like that, I think they'll like, because I don't think older people really get into vlogs, and I think this is a good chance to kind of get in the shoes of somebody in an organic way. And I think, that's, when you see someone else like, oh, that's how they're dealing with this, it kind of makes you feel a little better. Not that you're not that you're alone, because I think a lot of people kind of feel shuttered in, like, is Bill next door scared or nervous or unsure? So it kind of, I think, lets you into other people's lives a little more.
Absolutely.
One thing, if I can jump in here, that someone shared about how they're creating a sense of connection. I know, kind of similar to what our company is doing a little bit. And she says, this is from a company perspective, not a school, but they have a virtual happy hour with the whole marketing team every Friday, which is 200 people. So that's, certainly something that, I know we've done that, and just our own little smaller team at PhotoShelter is, because maybe every day or every afternoon, just like a check-in to just kind of chat to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of university professors are also doing that with their students too, which is great. And the more you can kind of create those things that you would normally do on campus and, recreate them online, I think the better. Awesome. Well, we're going to go into our 11 tips for a simple video workflow. But we'd love to keep hearing your thoughts. If you want to find your questions box, we can come back to these topics in the Q&A, and we'll kind of share our thoughts as we go through too. So to give you a little bit of background about me, I run content marketing for Libris by PhotoShelter. So my job is really to tell the story of other creatives like Al and like so many other people that we featured in this webinar series. I produce videos that go behind the scenes with our clients. I also do help videos and product launch videos. But my favorites are to go behind the scenes with real people and share how they're powering their creative workflow. So here's one from the dugout at Fenway Park. And then I've also worked with Applegate, the James Beard Foundation, the University of Florida, covering their graduation, which I think it'll be interesting to see, how people deal with graduation this year and tell the story in a completely different way than they're used to telling it. And with the ACC, which was a really good time at their tournament, and Samford University. Here's a photo of one of their football games a couple years ago. So that kind of gives you an idea of the videos I'm creating. And now I want to introduce Al and have him kind of share some of the things that he works on.
So I am the video production manager at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I've been there since 2012. I was the first one they ever hired. Up until then, they had been outsourcing video work to, big companies, video production companies. And then I think they had a few people on campus, shooting like kind of simple interviews. So it was my job when I came in to kind of set a tone for F&M videos, a look, a style, and it was a fun challenge because I really didn't have a predecessor that I had to worry about, like, oh, do I have to live up to that person or do what they were doing? It was a fresh start. So It really kind of, for me, became about documentary work. I'm also a documentary filmmaker. I've made a feature film called At the Drive-In on Amazon Prime. But for me, working at F&M is really what started that fascination with documentaries, and just how you can kind of tell a story in a different way. So that sort of led to our model for creating content, which we'll get into. But really, with everything I do, I try to be very simple and authentic. And with that, trying to create sort of an emotional reaction from the viewer. Now, obviously, not every video is that way, but a majority of the videos we make, we attempt to go in with that style.
Awesome. And now we're going to share an example of your work.
Yes, this is Todd, a photographer in Los Angeles who photographs celebrities, and I got to hang out with him for a day in Venice Beach. So I feel like 30 seconds might be good. Thank you. Yeah, well, I try to also capture the sort of mood and tone of each person. And, if you watch the entire video, he's a very sort of kind of a hippie, he's like, we're all together, man. Like, he gives the peace sign, he's that kind of guy. So I wanted to make a very sort of chill kind of hangout video with him, and while he tells his story. So, and I got to go surfing in the Pacific Ocean. Well, he surfed, I just swam around.
I love it. So good. Awesome. So we wanted to ask a question to kind of get a feel for who's on the call. And, we've had a lot of conversation at this point already, but I think, we'd love to learn a little bit more about your roles within your teams. So let us know who's creating photo and video content, who works alongside those creators or hires those creators, and then who just helps out with photo and video. Maybe you have a marketing role, but sometimes you pick up a camera. Let us know in the chat box, so we can kind of get a feel. My role is a hybrid role. So I write a lot of our content and I oversee all of our content, but I'm also a one-man band video producer. So I'm kind of wearing a lot of hats. Al, I know you wear a lot of hats too, but are very focused on video.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in today's climate, it makes sense to learn as many things as possible, because if you could, not saying you have to do it all, but if you could shoot and edit and write, and if you can do all those things, you can find a job somewhere just maybe doing one of those. But if you have experience and can do all of them, it really helps.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it looks like we've got a mix of people on the call. We've got a marketing strategist, hybrid, photographer and photo assistant, aspiring filmmaker, graphic designer / video editor, photographer, let's see, creator, shooting stills, editing, and video, collaborating with creative directors and art directors, photo and video, social media, school district communications, doing communications, all sorts of content on that one. Looks like we've got a real mix of people. Yoav, you're seeing a big mix too?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's just kind of, some level of hybrid, it looks like. Certainly photo and video, a lot of people doing, kind of owning both of those. And a decent amount of like photo assistants. I don't know if you saw that as well. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people wearing a lot of hats.
Great. Well, I hope that these tips are helpful no matter where you are on that spectrum. I think you'll have something to take away here. And it should be really helpful just in terms of your video storytelling in general, whether you're the person actually executing that workflow or if you're the person who's, hiring talent to help make stuff. We kind of already covered this for now, so I think we'll keep going. But if you want to share in the chat box, what types of videos you're creating, go for it. We'd love to see that. And one question that we want you to keep in mind throughout this talk is how can you create photos and videos that are uniquely authentic to your campus or to your company, and leave a lasting impression on your audience? I think this is a really good question to just keep in mind throughout, because it should inform everything you do and all the types of content that you're creating. Great. So we'll go ahead and dive into our 11 tips. Al, I'm going to let you kick it off with this one.
So originally, when I started at Franklin and Marshall in 2012, we were sort of what I call an Amazon fulfillment center. So if the government department needed a video for XYZ, they would send me and I'd go film something, or we would tell them, sorry, we can't, we're busy. And that sort of became the pattern for a little while. And occasionally I'd get to do a few passion projects on campus. After, we started making more passion projects, it started to shift a little bit, and we started to say, the videos where we found the story were turning out much better. They were getting better engagement on social media. They were winning awards, and I'm not just saying my work. We have another video producer, and we have a social media strategist who also does social media videos. So we started to realize that when we became and acted more like news reporters or journalists, the work got better and we got more engagement. So we started pitching, let's tell people, let's make an official document, first of all, to let people know this is what we're doing. So, if you're in the French club and you want a video, we can sort of help you in a way where we advise you or give you advice or set you up maybe with an external video producer, but we would not be the ones producing it. So we shifted to that probably a couple years ago, and like anything, it's not 100%. I wish I could say every video was that, but especially in times like this, things come up. You have to do a virtual closer look, which we were talking about in the sort of pre-show, which is a big event when students come to campus, and they can't come to campus now. So we had to produce a bunch of videos to kind of show them what campus is. And that was sort of requested, and we had to kind of fulfill that. So it's not 100%, obviously, if the president needs a video, but we felt like this if you're passionate about the story you're telling, you'll tell a better story, or you'll tell a good story very well. So that's what we found worked, and that's what we've been doing for a couple of years now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Great. And you want to share this example?
Yeah, this is Ryan. So this is an example of, I knew this kid, and he was interning at Disney World at Epcot in the land pavilion, and I just happened to be going on vacation with my wife and her family to Disney World. So brought a GoPro and just kind of went on a tour with him. He gave us a backstage tour and just filmed it. And it was fun, but we also got to make a video out of it. So it was just sort of something where, no one asked for this video. It was just, hey, I think this would be a great way to show an internship for an F&M student. Thank you. That's a video where no one asked for it, but it was just sort of a serendipitous type of thing, and I took it upon myself to do that. And I don't know if people just love Disney World or what, but it was pretty popular on Facebook, and so yeah. And again, we shot that with a GoPro, very simply. That's all it took.
I mean, I think everyone loves behind the scenes stuff. That has certainly informed our strategy and, how I produce videos. And I think you see that in sports and higher education and all sorts of different types of industries. And so I love how this takes you inside Walt Disney World, because I feel like not a lot of people get to do that. So it's so cool to see the behind the scenes.
No, they're very strict.
Yeah, that was very sneaky. Must have been the GoPro. Awesome.
So another thing we talk about a lot is trusting your audience, and usually it's the younger audience. A lot of times I'll hear, you know, oh, well, it's got to be 30 seconds or 60 seconds because they're in high school, or they're, you know, they just graduated, they're 22, they don't want to watch videos. And I disagree with that. I think kids, young kids, high school, recent grads, all they're doing is watching video. So what you have to do is sort of find the story and the style that kind of works, and the platform especially that works for that. So you know, people watch 15-minute vlogs, you know, every day on YouTube, and so it's just a matter of, are you telling the right story? Is this fun, interesting? Can it appeal to a non-F&M audience, which is something that I always keep in mind. I always try to make it appeal to the F&M audience first, but we always try to make it engaging for non-F&M audience members. So if you, and I've experienced this, and I don't know what your sort of experience has been like, but on top of F&M, I run a few other YouTube pages. And whenever we post video, or I post video, I feel like the engagement is a little down on Facebook. I don't know why, but I feel like posting YouTube links, people are much more apt to watch things on YouTube sometimes. And I think it's just because scrolling through Facebook, there's so much there, but on YouTube or Vimeo, you're not really distracted by that. So I play around with it. I would say test it out, figure out where your audience is watching. Because I mean, for some people, it's going to be Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So for some of the things I do, I found a link to a video might play a little bit better.
Yep, agreed. Great.
And so this is a video, and I don't know if we could skip ahead in this to closer to the end, but this is basically a video about a girl who came from China where she was 14 years old. She came to America to learn, and she's an F&M student, and she went through a very hard time, a very sad time in her life. And, you know, it's a very sort of mystical type of video, and it's aimed at prospective students. And I think, you know, this one was very popular as well. And I think it's just because of the story. And one thing I always say to, you know, when I talk to people on campus about creating content for younger students or prospective students is, when you're in high school, think about what your favorite movie or show was. And it was probably something that was deemed or characterized as, you know, being for mature audiences, like something that was older than you were. You know, like high school kids love, when I was in high school, everyone loved Pulp Fiction and, you know, all that stuff. And so I think people can handle more serious stories. Certainly not all the time. You don't want every video to be that, but I'm glad we told this specific story. Yeah, and that video, I mean, I could talk about that one ever. You know, there's a lot of visual stuff in there. Obviously, light, she talks about a light. So put her in the sunlight on her bed, you know, and I wanted it to be all natural because she was very mystical and about being one with sort of the world. So there's a lot of all the seasons are shown in the film at some point. I think there's a snow shot later on or something. Yeah, we could just show a couple. So it was just to kind of show the opposite tone. So this is a video for alumni, and we went the opposite way. We went like, let's make an 80s movie trailer spoof. Again, you know, we don't have to watch the whole thing, but I think you can get an idea.
Love it. Totally different.
Yes, and that was for, you know, an alumni, now younger alumni, but still alumni, but just to show you that, you know, people do have a sense of humor as well, and, you know, also can appreciate a more serious story. So don't be afraid to, you know, don't think it always just has to be everything is great and, you know, your campus or college is perfect. And
yeah, I like when people can have a little fun with it and then also tackle, you know, more challenging subjects like the one in your last video too. I think that was great.
That was my voiceover, by the way. So
oh, oh my gosh.
If anyone needs a movie trailer voiceover guy, in a world.
We know who to call.
Yes, you know who to call.
I love it. Great. Now, tip number 3. I love this tip.
So I think this is something that you also we both talked about quite a bit before. No story is too small. And for me, my main message is it's not, your story, the subject, the character, everything can be small. What will attract people and what will pierce everything is the theme. And I feel like if you can nail the theme, that's what people will respond to. So just because you're doing a story about some random photographer in Los Angeles, if you build in the theme of his life, that he's kind of like a Forrest Gump kind of character in a way, where he kind of floats around, and now he's all of a sudden he's photographing celebrities, and his story and the way he gets around and got there, that theme, I think, is what resonated with people. And this video, which is about Todd Westfall, and I think you showed the opening, like 30 seconds of it at the beginning of this, I think it won a CASE award for their national, for Circle of Excellence. And so, it clearly resonated with people outside of the F&M audience, as well as, it was pretty popular on Facebook. So again, don't feel like, oh, no one's going to care about this professor on our campus or this student, outside of our basic audience, because if you dig into their story, there will be a theme that you can build it all around. And for me, especially, that's how I kind of approach things.
Love it. I know we have a bunch of great questions already in the chat, so I think we're going to try to move a little quickly. Is it okay to skip this one now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do you have anything else to add about themes here?
Nope. I think I pretty much said all that.
Great. Moving right along here. I think you had a couple thoughts on this
That's
one.
my film, and that was just another point where this is a small drive-in in Pennsylvania, made this feature-length documentary. No one thought anyone outside of Pennsylvania would care, but they did. So go seek that out if you like drive-ins.
People love interesting stories. And one thing we want to share in this tip too is kind of how to uncover those stories in your organization. Al mentioned earlier, acting like a reporter. You have to talk to everybody in your organization, talk to those people on the front lines of your organization. For me, it's our customer service team who's talking to our customers every day, trying to figure out, who is doing something interesting right now, who's, telling a really cool story, and who can I go shadow and share their story. When I worked at a school, I was always talking to the teachers, the people who are interacting with our students every day. Talk to everybody, check in regularly, and make sure that they know too that no story is too small. I think a lot of the time people think, oh, the marketing team, they don't want to hear about this, they won't care about this, and you do. And so make sure that they know you want to hear their stories. And every time they come to you with an idea, say, I love that, I'll add it to my list, because you don't want to shoot them down and discourage them from coming to you next time. So add it to your list always, and always make them, know that you're grateful that they brought you something. And I love this line. This is a Yoav line. Create a culture where everyone feels empowered to share and celebrate success stories. Make sure everybody feels empowered to share their stories with you, so that they know that maybe one day the story that they found will end up, on your social media channels or on your YouTube. Great. Okay, this is a more workflow, technical tip. Keep your shooting simple. I think this is such an important tip, especially if you're starting out with video, you're just starting to work on your video skills. Always use a tripod or a monopod. Don't pan, don't try to get fancy. Just put the camera down on a tripod and leave it as it is. Choose your shot and stick with it. And if you do have to move, try to use usable moves. I had a boss early on in my career who would always stand over my shoulder and say this to me as I was shooting. Usable moves. Don't try to move the camera and go like this with it, which is nice, but I have my camera on. You can actually see me doing this motion on today's webinar. And we wanted to share our gear with you because I think people always have questions about gear. So Al and I are both Canon shooters. I also use a Sony mirrorless camera, but feel free to screenshot that slide if you're looking for a list of good gear. Always have a tripod or a monopod mic up. It's always good to have a mic, especially if you're doing interviews. It can really take the quality of your video to the next level. And then also lighting is always really important too. But as Chase Jarvis said, the best camera is the one you have with you. So always remember, it's more about the story you're telling than the gear you have to tell it with. Tip number 5 is to vary your shots. You can see this is a story I did with professional bull riders. So Andy Watson and JC Watson are in these photos. Andy's been the photographer for PBR for 25 years. And I was profiling him and talking about how he tells stories. And I wanted to capture his environment and close-ups of him. And then, cutaways. It's always important to have cutaways. That bottom left shot of him taking notes, that's an easy cutaway. I love environmental interviews, shooting them in a place that looks like, where they would normally be. And then the shot on the bottom right is of JC, and she was in Montana. I did not have the opportunity to be there, but I wanted to make sure that we could tell the full story. And so I asked if they had the ability to get me some footage of her in her home studio in Montana. And they did. And so my tip there is just to always ask. If somebody says, oh yeah, I had, something in the past that would be helpful for your story, say, hey, do you have pictures of that? It's always important to ask, if you can get something that you can't get yourself. And I love this tip, watch your favorite reality show and take notes on how they shoot a scene. You can see all of those different pieces. And my favorite reality show, The Bachelor, poor Peter. I don't know if anyone else watched. Horrible season of The Bachelor, but still very entertaining and still very helpful if you're trying to learn how to shoot a scene. So you've got, your individual shot on a conversation in those top left 2 blocks. You've got your 2 shot where they're cheersing. In the bottom left, you've got your interview shot. Then you've got a cutaway in the bottom middle, and then your reaction shot. The most important thing is capturing those moments. So that bottom right shot, that is the shot you're always looking for.
Kristen,
yeah.
Can I jump in here with someone
Yes,
asked a question when we were actually showing one of the videos earlier, but I think this is a good time to jump in. Is how do you either of you, both of you, plan out your B-roll shots ahead of time?
Great question. Al, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I'm at the point now where I don't plan it out at all, and I think it's just from doing it for as many years as I've been. 2012 is when I started at F&M, like I said, but I was shooting before that, so it's been over 10 years of doing this, and now I feel confident that if I'm on a sort of documentary shoot, I kind of feel like I know the moves, I know where to look and what interests me. I think an important tip that I can give you is to know your style, know yourself, know what interests you. Because if you have that down, I guarantee you it'll definitely help in the preparation. Or maybe you can, throw everything out the window and not prep like I do. But I mean, I prep, but not necessarily. I don't make a shot list anymore.
Yeah. I think my planning depends a lot on an intro call with the person who I'm shadowing. So I want to know what I'm going to have the opportunity to see, and that should determine what I capture. And I want to know, what I'll have access to. I did a story with the photographer for the Golden Knights, Jeff Batari, which is the new Las Vegas hockey team. And it was during their first season. And people want to see how you make that teamwork and they want to see a new angle. And so I was able to go up into the rafters with him and see him hang remote cameras up in the rafters, you know, yards above the ice. And it was terrifying for someone who has a fear of heights, but it was so cool in the video. And I had to get there early to get that shot. And I'm glad that I had that call ahead of time to say, okay, what time does your day start? You know, normally he might have said, okay, come, you know, an hour before the game. But instead I said, I want to see everything. What time do you get there? And he said, okay, you can come 3 hours before the game. So because I had that intro call and kind of got an understanding of what I might be able to have access to, I was able to plan it out a little bit better. So I'd say, you know, talk to the people that you're featuring and see what you might be able to have access to, and then you'll start kind of putting the pieces together in your head.
And I do that too, and I think that's a great tip, Kristen. I somehow forgot that.
Easy to forget. It becomes muscle memory after a while.
It does.
Great. I love
So,
this tip.
Giving the audience perspective they can't normally see. I mean, this shot looks dynamic and fun. It's literally just giving a swimmer a GoPro and having them dive into the water, and then it just makes me look good, but they did all the work.
I love it.
And I just feel like when you're shooting, coming up with shots, I always try to, at least in some video or some story, provide something, whether it's an extreme close-up, you know, whatever they might be doing, if it's grains of sand, something that you just can't normally see every day. Adding a shot in like that every now and then, or at least once a video, I think can really pop.
Love it. Tip number 6 is to have a conversation. This is for your interviews, and I think we have a few tips to get more out of a conversation, an interview conversation. You want to take those out?
Yeah, and this can really benefit, I think, in a lot of ways, because you're gonna, you know, at times you're gonna get in situations where you're either interviewing for a documentary or interviewing for an overview video, or sometimes, you know, they might ask you, hey, this is an important alumni. You have to interview this person, and they're not the best on camera. So you're going to get stuck in those kind of positions sometimes. So these are sort of ways to help. First off, conversation, not interview. That's number one. Set the scene with your questions. If there's any Howard Stern fans out there, I think, you know, to me, he's the best interviewer on the planet. And it's because when he asks a question, he'll kind of set the stage for the scene. He'll set it up like he's sort of reading the description of in a script. Very descriptive, and it sort of brings that person back into that moment. So if someone's not giving you great answers, if you're just like, tell me what it was like to be a doctor, they'll be like, oh yeah, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then you don't get what you need, kind of set the stage like, okay, you're just out of medical school. It's your first day. You know, kind of add in all that detail, and it'll allow them to sort of fill in the blanks and kind of, you know, talk more about it. And your energy matters. Your energy is super important. If you read off a piece of paper flat, they're going to respond flat, unless they're pros. I mean, every now and then you're going to hit the lottery and you're going to interview a pro who's like super good. You know, you can just lob it to them and they'll knock it out of the park. And I've been the recipient of those lucky interviews before, and they really help. And then a little sneaky trick, just leave the camera running when the interview's done and act like it's over, and kind of talk about like, man, remember when you said that? That was really cool. And they'll think the interview's over and they might open up a little bit more. Just get their permission though after the fact. Let them know that you did that if they say something you think is usable. So
totally agree. And I always ask, you know, what else do you have to add? We love this video. We'll share the link in our follow-up to the webinar, because I think it's a great example of how to do an interview. You know, here are some questions that you can use in your interview. Always start with a question that starts with something like, tell me about this, or walk me through blah, blah, blah. Focus on before and after. You know, what was your life like before F&M? What is it like now? And my tip is to embrace the awkward pause. It is hard to, you know, let somebody flounder after they end a sentence, or, you know, after you ask a question and they might need a minute to think about it. It's hard not to jump in and fill that silence for them. So my main tip is to embrace the awkward pause. It will take some training. I'm a talker. I typically like to jump in and fill the silence, but the more you can let it be quiet, the more you'll get a great answer from the person you're talking to.
Yeah,
Tip
I
number
love that
7.
rule. I love that.
My gift.
Oh, gift.
Lots of fun footage of me like that. Tip number 7 is to log your interviews. I always do this. I use a service called rev.com now, so I don't have to do it myself. But write down your best sound bites so you're not scrubbing through an interview in Premiere or whatever editing platform you use. It's great to actually have a written out script of all your sound bites so you can go back and highlight different parts and choose your sound bites. So tip number 8 is to choose sound bites you couldn't say as a third person narrator. This is Sarah Matheson, a photographer in our community. And she said, some people buy loaves of bread. I buy camera equipment at the same frequency. I could not say that as a third person narrator, but it's such a great soundbite that Sarah said that really gives you a window into her fun personality. So I think that's a good example of how to choose a good soundbite. So let's do a little test. What makes a good soundbite? I'm the official photographer for the PBR. I've been doing it for 22 years. I travel with the team all across the country. That's helpful, but is it entertaining? This one is a lot more entertaining. It's an edge of the seat sport. You pay for the whole seat, but you'll only use the edge. So I chose this one to start out my video with Andy Watson, who I mentioned earlier from the PBR. Choose sound bites that are really fun. Does it grab your attention? Is it easy to paraphrase? If it's not, it's probably a good soundbite. Would it be just as valuable if you said it? And just hearing it from that person actually tell you something about that person. Tip number 9 is to start with your best B-roll. Start with the fire, the pyro, in the middle of the ring, not a talking head. People want to see like fun stuff to start with. Something to catch your attention. That's like journalism 101.
So this is add depth and creativity to your images with symbolism. This is once you feel like you have, the practical side of filmmaking down, and this is definitely something that took me years to kind of start doing. And I think the Sophie Wu video that we showed earlier is a good example of this, with the light, with the seasons and nature and sort of the scope of her story. And this is a video, this Mary Haverstick video, which you can find at F&M's YouTube page, FANDM College on YouTube. So check that out.
Awesome. And our last tip is to recut and repurpose. So I always test my videos. You should always edit based on your test results, see what's holding people's attention, and then create a new version of the same video and use those learnings in your next story. Repackage your content, use it over and over again. I think, most videos are evergreen that you're creating, and especially when you're doing documentary work like this, and you can use them in different situations, and lots of people miss it the first time. Don't be afraid to share it again. And centralize your content. Of course, this is a tip from us, but keep your best clips in a go-to place where you can reuse them in new ways. And, you mentioned file video earlier out. That's always, handy to have around, but certainly right now, very helpful. And then reshare and maximize the value of every piece of content. The more you share one piece of content, the more value you'll get out of it. Great, cool. And we'll leave you with this question again. We are still going to take questions. You guys have, shared a ton of questions. I know we're right up on time here, but we'd still love to take your questions. Feel free to go and we'll send out the recording, or if you want to stick around and ask more questions, we've got time. So we're here, and Yoav, I know you have a ton of questions in the questions box.
Yes, definitely, and thank you both. We've gotten a lot of comments on the videos and the presentation in general. People are really loving, so thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining. So without any further ado, let's jump into some questions. I'm gonna fire about 3 gear tech questions at you. Those are kind of the main ones we got about that stuff. So feel free to jump on any of these. So someone was asking if you use a gimbal. And then we might have answered this one, but kind of what is your run and gun audio setup? Do you have a LAV or lav on subjects, or is it the on-camera mic? And Kristen, what program do you use to log your interviews?
Great. I do use a gimbal. It's a DJI Ronin S. It has really taken my videos to the next level. I didn't for years. I always used a monopod. I love having the gimbal now. It just added, some stability to my shots when I was, in my run and gun setup. And I use a shotgun, a Rode shotgun on the camera in my run and gun setup. But anytime I'm doing an interview, I'm always using a lav mic routed to an external sound recorder. Al?
I don't. I pretty much just go handheld with the Canon C100 Mark II or Canon C300 Mark II. I use image stabilized lenses for the most part. I just feel like I've gotten into a groove with how I shoot, so I've kind of just stayed like that. I've tried other things and certainly like them. Audio, I have the Rode shotgun mic on my Canon C300 or C100, and I use a lav mic for interviews. So.
And I use rev.com to log my interviews. It's like
Great.
$1 a minute, I think. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. And I think that rev.com might have answered one of the more recent ones about closed and open captioning and best practices around that. If it didn't answer your question, just shoot me a note. I want to jump back to, this was a question kind of midway through about the campus community. So someone was wondering, how do you get your campus community to share their stories with you?
So there's a number of ways. Obviously, you can go through social media. I think we send out emails. It's really a collaborative effort. So if we're going through alumni, we're trying to get alumni stories, we go through the advancement office. They have all the contacts, email lists. They can kind of send out an email or just get in touch with certain alumni directly. And then in terms of students, they are still learning. They still do have classes. They're just at home, so we go through the professors if we need to get them. And we have a few, students here and there that the admission office, whether they're tour guides or they just work in the admission office. We have interns, so we have our sort of ways to kind of reach out and get in touch with them. But it really is collaborative. You have to use other offices, admission for students mainly, and advancement for alumni.
Yeah, I would also add, you just have to ask all the time. So always put it in your newsletter, put it on social media. Start with a prompt if you're looking for a specific type of story. So if you're saying like, we're looking for an F&M alum who is a photographer to feature, you can put out more specific prompts like that. For us, it's just really about reminding people that we're here and we're looking for stuff. When I was working in a school, I would walk around with a camera every day taking pictures for social media, and we called it Smiles of the Day. It was just a fun way to fill our Facebook feed and give families a window into the school. But if I hadn't been in the classroom every day, I would never have found my favorite stories. Because I was in the classroom every day, the teachers would come to me and say, hey, you should come take pictures of this birthday party, or hey, did you know this kid is working on this? Maybe that could be a story. So I found all of my favorite stories that way. Sometimes the little things turn into the best stories that you can come up with for marketing.
And I'll jump in. I know I'm not the expert here, but I think you, at least working with Kristen, and I know in our experience, as we distribute stories, more people, the more people see kind of other stories, they're like, oh, they kind of come to us a little bit. And I think probably both of you do a great job at actually just following the people in your communities to kind of come across those stories. I feel like some of our past webinars, we saw someone's comment on social media and then started a conversation with them. So I think
Definitely.
those are another way. This one is specifically for Al. And I think a lot of university photographers probably wondering about this. How do you sell your university on travel for a feature like that on your alumni?
So You have to start local. So if you can do something local and make it good and sort of build up that, oh, well, he did that. So if we let him go there or her go there, so it started, you kind of, and some, F&M at the time had a good budget. Some colleges don't. F&M right now or F&M was recently in the past 6 months going through sort of a budget issue, which is kind of resolved. But now because of all this coronavirus thing, everything is up in the air. But I would say if you really want to do that, start by finding a local alum or, just kind of prove that going to tell that story would be worth it. And so you're going to have to do, a lot of local pieces. And that's what I mean. At first, they were sending me to Philadelphia, which is like an hour and 10 minutes from campus. And then finally, I think the first big one I pitched was Colorado. So I did a horse farrier in the mountains of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, and it was amazing. Not the video, I'm not seeing the videos of it, but like the experience was amazing.
Yeah,
And
I
again,
totally agree.
that video is online too. So just start making a case for yourself with the work and say it's important that you tell this story. And also, if you could like narrow down why that specific story needs to be told, make a presentation, do a Don Draper and pitch it, so.
Cool. Just a quick question, I guess clarification, and then we'll move on to just a totally different topic. When we were talking about mics, do you prefer a shotgun mic over a lav, or let's see, or a shotgun on a boom?
I only use the shotgun directly on top. I have the camera right behind me. Hang on.
Perfect. I'll answer. For me, I use a lav connected to a recorder in an interview. Oh, look at that. Right there, run and gun.
So do I have to talk for my screen to come up? Can you guys see this?
People can see you, yeah.
So the way that's on there is how I keep it. And then sometimes if I have the lav mic, it's wireless, so the receiver will go on top of the camera and I'll mic up the person. So sometimes if they're real, like they move a lot, I might mic them up with that and just kind of run and gun that way. For interviews though, it's usually 90% of the time wireless lav.
Yeah, same for me. I always use a wireless lav that's routed into an external sound recorder because I'm shooting on a DSLR. And then during an actual run and gun shoot, I have the same situation where the shotgun is on top of the camera.
Cool. Thank you guys. So just to really jump gears now, when we were talking about, I think the videos that you post on Facebook and versus YouTube, and people were just curious if you had any data or kind of where that was coming from on video consumption, specifically for high school seniors. That was one of the questions. And then just, I guess, kind of a more open question. I was chatting back and forth with someone about, Facebook and maybe YouTube has higher, views in your experience because people don't have to sign into their Facebook account, or maybe the senior, the high school senior class is not really so much on Facebook, and, have you guys experimented with TikTok or Instagram? And, that's, I've lost who I was chatting with about that, but just kind of that world of how you are kind of figuring out the best ways to engage your target audience.
So I think we pretty much gave up on Facebook for prospective students. I mean, the prevailing thought is that 16-year-olds aren't on Facebook. So our social media strategist, he's the one. See, I make the stuff, and then we have another video producer, as I said, Andrew. He makes stuff. We kind of, we share our thoughts and opinions, but it's other people who are kind of sharing it. The decision was to kind of move away from, we still sometimes will post it on Facebook, but it's student videos for prospective students mainly go on YouTube, and that is what they get sent. So they send out like a weekly, I think it's a weekly email to prospective students, and they're pitching the YouTube page, they're pitching YouTube videos, specific videos. So we try to keep everything for that. Instagram is also another big one. I know our social media strategist also uploads to Instagram TV, and they get a lot of views and comments there. Again, Instagram, personally, I like Instagram a lot, just because it's still scrolling like Facebook, but there's just something more visual about it, and I don't feel like it's as distracting, because your uncle's not on there talking about, politics. So it's just a simpler kind of visual platform. So
cool. All right, I'm gonna jump in here with thanks for everyone who's still on. Having a lot of fun with everyone who's chiming in. So I'm gonna give 3 questions here that are pretty. Let's do it kind of rapid fire, and then there's kind of a more open-ended question. So either of you or both of you can just jump in. In your interviews, how many cameras are you using?
I used 2.
Both 1 or 2. I've started using 2, and I really like that. I kind of handhold the second camera.
Okay,
Oh,
great.
I like
Next.
that too. I do 1 tight and 1 wide to show the environment.
Nice.
Rapid.
Okay, so rapid fire. Next question. Are you also doing these interviews solo, or do you have like someone helping you or an assistant?
Solo.
Solo.
Nice.
I love doing solo.
That's why we hit it off so easily.
And speaking of interviews, do either of you worry about using makeup on your interview subjects?
I never think about it. You?
I didn't hear your question. Can you repeat it?
Makeup.
Oh, I don't know if I should tell this. We used to have to put makeup on the president of F&M way back in the day. He's not the president anymore, but we would touch him up every now and then, yeah. But our current president, no.
I agree. I think if it's your university president, encourage it. Like when it's an official video like that, I think it's okay. I wear a lot of makeup on camera when I do our help videos. I encourage like powder mainly. But I don't ever try to control, what my interview subjects look like. I do try to control how I light them to make them look really good. And so think about your lighting and how you can make that person look their best with lighting. Don't put a harsh light on somebody's face that, nobody wants that.
Okay, great. We'll keep going here. We have just a couple more questions. If you have questions, feel
And
free
a lot
to
of people still here. Thank you guys for hanging with us.
Breaking all the rules here. All
We are.
right. So the next question is, this person normally uses a Tascam DR60 for recording sound when he uses DSLRs, and a 10 sync with camera sound using plural eyes. Do you have any recommendations for recording sound when shooting with an iPhone?
So they do make a lot of little microphones for an iPhone. If you go into an Apple store, which you can't do right now, but they do make a lot of helpful things. I know a lot of people record podcasts and interviews on phones now, and I think that's totally normal and doable now. So just kind of look. I would literally just go to Google and say best microphone for iPhone, and you'll find tons, and you'll be able to use that for audio.
Yeah,
I wouldn't recommend doing that all the time, but that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I have a couple different iPhone setups. If I'm doing like an interview, I would prefer to plug a lav into the iPhone. So it's like a wired lav straight into your iPhone. Another option is like they make those little smaller Rode shotgun mics that are easily mounted. I have this little iPhone rig that holds your phone in one part of the rig and then has a spot where I can mount the mic on the other side, and then I just put that on top of a monopod. We've used that if I'm doing like a Facebook Live that's a walk and talk or something like that, or a Twitter Live. It's not amazing, but it ups the quality of the sound just a little bit.
Cool. Well, so I will be the bad guy here and cap it with we'll just say 2 more questions. These will be the last 2 questions. One I think is pretty short. Do you guys work with detailed storyboards?
I sort of do. I don't know if that's a good enough answer. What I do, I'll just walk you through my storyboarding process, which I don't know if it's unique or not. I go through my log and I write down themes that are sticking out to me. And then that allows me to think about what themes I want to pull out and really use in my story. And then I go back through the log and look at my favorite sound bites that work with those themes and try to thread those together to build a story arc. I move all of those sound bites onto a Google Doc in order so that I can see the story written out before I ever put it into Premiere. And then I always think about, what do I have that's visual that I want to start with? What do I have that's visual that connects to those sound bites? That I typically just do during the editing process. On the flip side, when I'm doing a how-to video or a product video, I write out a storyboard, just basically a table. So 2 columns and a table, and I have what you're hearing and what you're seeing. So I write out my voiceover script on one side, and then I write out what you're seeing on the other side. Al?
I mean, for documentary stuff, no. But like you said, Kristen, I do like a pre-interview to kind of figure out, because once I know where I can film, if I can get a photo of it, kind of those details, then I can, in my head, just kind of figure out, what I want to do. But we've done like more narrative videos, so we've gotten a chance, like you saw the sort of 80s movie trailer spoof. We've gotten to do those. We did an Office spoof where there was like an alum who was 50 and he was trying to fit in with like the younger student, pretending he was still like a young alum. And then I think we did another one where it was like an 80s workout video spoof. So those were videos where we have scripts, we have storyboards, but for anything, if it's like an overview of like, an initiative, or if it's like anything where there's interviews and then B-roll, usually no.
Cool. So this will be the last question. I just there's been a couple back and forth about some other questions and things that have come up. So one, someone else shared about the recording with an iPhone. Something called iRig makes an iPhone iPad mic preamp that Matt loves. And Kristen, the software that you use for transcriptions is rev.com, rev.com, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So I hope that clears it up for people who are asking. So the last question here, and we touched on it a little bit, is how are you, I guess it's for Al or really anybody, but how are you documenting the value of your work without contest awards? This person is finding it hard to show value of video gear and projects compared to the expense now that everyone has a camera phone.
So is the question, is it trying to prove to your boss why you need certain equipment, or having your work visually stand out from, since everyone's shooting? I'm not 100% sure what they're asking.
I think the first version, just in terms of kind of proving the value of your work. I mean, somebody else was like, "Oh, don't talk about shooting with iPhones too much, put me out of a job," or something like that. So I think just the question is about, the kind of communicating the value of your work in today's environment, or the environment
Right.
a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
even.
and I think that just comes back to when people see like some of the work that I was doing early on wasn't getting great traction online or anything, but people in the department and on campus were really like, I would get random emails from like, a professor or someone saying, that was really interesting and looked really like, what are you shooting that with? So I feel like, again, you can't just expect right off the bat that they're going to buy you, a super expensive camera or super expensive gear. If you could show them examples of either other videos from other schools where, you know, hey, look, they used this camera and did this. Doesn't that look great? I think that'll help. Or if you do work on your own time. So like I do work outside of Franklin and Marshall, as I said before, and I could show them that work and experiment there and say, hey, look at this. I used this. Can we get one? So, you know, and a bit of a small, weird little inside tip, when the fiscal year is ending, always ask for equipment, because a lot of people might have leftover budgets that get wiped out on July 1. So if you go in around, you know, mid-May and around commencement and say, you know, I could use that drone or that camera or that lens, they might just say, oh yeah, we have this money left over in the budget that we'll lose if we don't use it. So that might be, that's what I did for like 4 years. So
I think you're spot on. And I also think, you know, using that tip that Al mentioned about giving people perspectives they don't normally get to see, like, don't shoot with a DSLR the way anyone could shoot with an iPhone. You know, think about how you can get those close-ups, how you can, you know, grab a GoPro and send it into the pool with the swimmer. You know, how can you as the storyteller set your work apart? And it really is about using those muscles that you have that everyone with an iPhone doesn't necessarily have. You are the storyteller. You are the person who pulls out those themes, who puts together a story that's unique to your school or your brand, and you know the values, you know, of your organization. And so you have a unique ability to make those ties. And it's not about the gear, it's so much more about you as a storyteller. So the gear is just a necessary tool to do the art that you do. Awesome. Thank you guys all so much for being here. We are so appreciative that you took the time to be with us and to hang in there a little longer for the questions. And we'd love to know what you want to learn from us next. We're planning some more of these webinars for the next couple weeks. So be sure to find your questions box again one last time and let us know what you want to see from us. We'll leave this up for a few more minutes as everybody leaves. But Al, thank you so much for sharing your tips with us. That was great, and your work was beautiful. And I just add that if you're having any trouble, you know, getting a budget for gear or department or resources, show everyone Al's videos and being like, don't you want to be like this? We should all be more like Al.
thank you, appreciate it. And if anyone had any unanswered questions, I'm always happy to talk on social media or email, so feel free.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank all of you
Thank
for
you,
being
guys.
here. We got so many thank yous coming in the comments. Al, thank you. This has just been awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Had
guys.
fun.
We'll see you next time.